So good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's good to see everybody here this evening. So, Brian, are we good? Okay, good. So we are here tonight to have a conversation about historic preservation in Temple Terrace. It is going to be our 100th anniversary here in 2025. This is not a new topic. It's been discussed for at least 40 or 50 years, or going back in the minutes. So this has come up many, many times before, which gives us the benefit of seeing some of the previous kind of choke points is where the conversation stalled. So, and many times it's in some of the same places. So we have the benefit of that. So once again, we're going to explore this option. There will be no definitive action taken at this meeting. This is just a kind of an introductory conversation to the idea, and we'll see where we go from here. And so I'd like to turn this over to our interim city manager, Steve Spiniff, and let Steve introduce the topic.
All right, thank you, Mayor. We're going to talk tonight about historic preservation, but we're also going to look at the issue of certified local government and how that can enhance the historic preservation process. So I would like to introduce Mariah Justice. Mariah is a Florida native, born and raised in Brevard County. She received a master's in architectural conservation from the University of Edinburgh and is a member of the International Committee for the Conservation of Industrial Heritage. She currently serves as the state certified local government coordinator for the Bureau of Historic Preservation and is visiting us from Tallahassee today. Mariah?
Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the invite. I had a presentation prepared. If we could pop that up, that would be lovely. Okay, awesome. Well, my name is Mariah Justice. I am the Certified Local Government Coordinator for the state of Florida. Currently, we are the 5th largest certified local government program in the country, with soon to be 83 certified local governments. It is a very large program, which I think is a testament to how important preservation is within the state of Florida, particularly with all these development pressures that I'm sure y'all are dealing with day in and day out. So I'm going to go over what is the Certified Local Government Program, how it can benefit your community, and what are the duties and responsibilities associated with that, and what are the benefits that you get in return. Okay, so the Certified Local Government Program was begun in the 1980s with an amendment to the National Historic Preservation Act. And what the Certified Local Government Program is a linkage in between the federal, state, and local levels of government for the benefit of historic preservation. So it is a federal program. All the certification is done through the National Park Service, but it's administered at the state level through our office, particularly through me, since I'm the only one that runs this program here at the state level. Okay, so within the Division of Historical Resources, there is the Bureau of Historic Preservation, and that's where this program is administered from. Okay, so what exactly is a certified local government? A CLG is a community that's made a commitment to historic preservation, and it's become an act in legislation, and there's a board to oversee the implementation of that historic preservation legislation at the local level. Okay, so it's a way for local governments to have a hand in their own historic preservation. It's not the state telling you what to do. It's not the federal government telling you what to do. You live in your community. You know your resources best. So this is why we want historic preservation to be locally oriented. Okay. CLGs upon certification, so you have your ordinance that meets our criteria at the state, and then you have your board that also meets our requirements at the state. You're certified by Park Service as a CLG. What does that mean? Well, certified local governments have special expertise in historic preservation. Therefore, you get special grant funding. You get training through our office and through me in any historic preservation needs, technical assistance, networking within our very, very large CLG communities, statewide, not only statewide, but nationwide, particularly with things like sea level rise and issues like that. Other states can be quite helpful, and being a CLG opens up that network to you of assistance and support. Along with that, since you do have special expertise in that historic preservation, a lot of the work associated with that gets delegated down to you that would otherwise come to the state. So reviewing FEMA substantial improvement requirements, that would be done at the local level. Ad valorem tax reviews would be done at the local level, and you no longer have to send that to the state for review. Okay, and I'll touch on those a little bit later. What are your responsibilities associated with being a CLG? First of all, is identifying what historic resources you actually have, because we don't know what to protect if we don't know what we have. So creating a system of survey and documenting our places, age, significance, why they're important, why they matter to our community, and what makes them special. And with that, designating those resources as having particular historic value. Then we conduct design review of those particular designated historic resources. So design review has to do with any sort of exterior change to the building. Now, we're not trying to say what we can or can't do with it. Adaptive reuse is a wonderful thing for communities, and historic preservation kind of goes hand in hand with that. But what we don't want to do is completely alter the building so it no longer has the significance and that it did to our community when we first started. So that's the purpose of our design review. CLGs also should be educating the public about your history, your heritage, and historic preservation goes along with that, and it's a great tool to do that. And like I mentioned, surveying. Okay, so what are the benefits? What's in it for you? Through our office, through DHR, you can get small matching grants that are used for anything kind of surveying, National Register nominations, planning, historic preservation, like citywide plans, comprehensive plans. It's up to a $50,000 grant award. For CLGs, that award, the match is completely waived. So you do not have to provide any match at all. And actually for the CLG program nationwide, this is actually quite rare. A lot of other states require a percentage match. In the state of Florida, we require none. You're eligible for any federal funding. A lot of times National Park Service will put out particular grants that can only be applied for by state governments or certified local governments, because once again, you have that special expertise in preservation, and Park Service recognizes this, and they want to delegate that money down to you to do special historic preservation projects with. Here's a few examples of some grant projects that have been done in our other CLG communities. So anything from surveys, historic structure reports, design guidelines with our community, telling our community, you know, these kind of changes we encourage with our properties, these kind of changes we don't. Any educational projects, historic markers, walking tours, walking guides, all of those projects, $50,000 grant award, match is completely waived for CLGs. Oopsies. Okay. Here's a little rundown so you can see kind of what projects were applied for, exactly how much money was delegated. You see our CLG communities benefit so much from this particular part of this program. Training is another big asset to you being a CLG. So you can have a historic preservation program and not be a part of the CLG program. Why we recommend that you are is that you then get all the training through the state at any request. We can come down, provide training to your board, to your staff, to your community about how exactly you do that. So you're not trying to conduct your historic preservation program on an island. You really are open to any support, technical assistance. How do we fix this building? How do we educate the public? Our board members don't know how to review these properties. Any of those questions can be answered by our office. We do on-site trainings, regional trainings every 2 years, so board members can network and get together with other communities and spread knowledge, webinars, roundtables. We have a quarterly roundtable every, what's our next one? May will be our next one. And our next topic is going to be tax credits and how can we use tax credits to benefit our communities. So there's really a lot of networking and training opportunities, so you're not just left out to dry about how exactly do we do historic preservation. So here you can see just how extensive this program is throughout the state of Florida. You are getting a wide range of expertise in terms of networking, East Coast, West Coast, Central Florida. I know we all have development pressure, but we all handle it a little bit differently. So it's neat to take from different communities and kind of, share ideas and share the wealth that way. As a CLG, you have a say in proposed National Register properties in your jurisdiction. Your board gets to review National Register nominations for completeness and accuracy and provide formal comment, as well as the chief elected official can provide formal comment on this National Register nomination. Once again, you have special expertise. You're allowed a say in how this process takes place. National Register listed properties, if they are revenue producing, can qualify for a federal tax credit. And that's part of the reason that we send some of this work down to you, is that, is this property eligible? You're the ones that have it in your community, you know it best. FEMA variances, if you are a CLG, buildings that you designate as historic fall underneath FEMA's definition for historic building and are then exempt from certain substantial improvement requirements. Review for that. For CLGs, you can do that at the local level. You work with your local floodplain manager, but those are no longer sent to the state. And I'm sure this was sent to you, so all my reference material, you can find exactly where to contact your floodplain manager and where I'm getting this information. Local tax credit programs are fantastic for historic preservation and growing local communities and raising property values. If you are a CLG, this ad valorem tax credit review is done at the local level through your local staff. It is not sent to our tax credit people at the state. And it is a tax abatement on the improved property value of the structure. Those improvements need to be done within the Secretary of Interior standards, which is something that as a CLG your board should be doing anyways with their ordinance to regular buildings. And those improvements you can see here in Tarpon Springs can be quite substantial and actually bring buildings back to life for our communities. A little bit about the application process. It's not exactly complicated, but I'm sure you know how government works, so it does take a few months. The hardest part is enacting that local legislation. It must meet the CLG requirements for the state of Florida. However, those requirements are not extensive. They just provide a framework in which we expect communities that have special expertise to act within. As long as it meets those requirements, I look at it in my office and see if it meets the requirements. It passes through the local government. You have your board. You don't even have to have your first historic preservation board meeting yet. You don't have to have a survey done yet. You can totally start square one and receive that support from us. Once you get that ordinance passed, then you fill out an application and submit that to me, and I look at it. If it's complete, I'll send it on to Park Service, and then the Secretary of Interior is actually the certifying authority. And upon their concurrence, then voila, you are a CLG. Okay, I'm gonna leave this up for a bit. Here are some responsibilities that are associated with being a CLG. Now, we touched on a few of these before, and like I said, the only extra bit of staff time for this, I would say over 50% of my communities have their local planning staff act as their historic preservation staff. They don't have dedicated historic preservation staff. My hometown, Melbourne, Florida, does not have historic preservation staff, but they have very keen staff that are excited about their community and want to see those places saved. And so I work with the local city planner. The only extra bit is completing an annual report, which is 2 pages of basically just links and information about what you did that year. So then I can look and do an evaluation every 4 years, like Park Service tells me to, and says, yes, they're doing good work, they're completing their duties. All the other things, submitting minutes and agendas, you guys do that anyway with all of your meetings. You just CC me on the email. It's no extra staff time really for being a CLG. With conducting historic preservation, the extra staff time is with how many resources that you have. So if you have one resource, it's not going to be that much time, right? If you have one historic district, that might be a little bit extra time for some different certificates of appropriateness and things, but it's nothing that can't be handled by staff that's already there. Larger cities, Daytona Beach doesn't have dedicated staff. So there are quite large communities that just use their local planning staff as sufficient for historic preservation and CLG duties. Here are some resources for you to look up some more information, some links to our websites. The last one is my favorite one, Economic Benefits of Preservation. Especially here in Florida, we find that historic preservation increases property values and is actually more of a benefit to communities than just tearing down and building new. So I highly recommend not giving it a full read, giving it a glance. Okay, here's my contact info, and I can take any questions that y'all may have, either about historic preservation or the CLG program.
Thank you, Ms. Justice, and thank you for coming here to present to us tonight. We all really appreciate you taking the time to come down here and present. So I do have one question, and I'll let my colleagues ask questions, but having read through the minutes of 50 years of meetings, I kind of have a sense of where, the sticking points were. And we had the whole CLG conversation really not that long ago. In fact, some of us were here. Yeah, we were here when this occurred last time. So let me just ask one question that kind of covers a lot of other questions, and that is, Temple Terrace does not have a historic district. We have historic homes that are sprinkled throughout our community, like one here and one over here and one, so we don't have them clustered. And so one of the issues that's been thorny in the past is the city is eligible to apply and receive grants, but the homeowners themselves are not. And so the city only owns, to my knowledge, we only own one historic building, and that's in pretty good repair. We keep that up all the time. And so where we've gotten stuck before with CLG is, what is the benefit to the property owner? Because we can apply for grants, and I'm not even sure what we would do with them because we don't have a historic district. So what would we do if you gave us money?
Right.
And then how does the homeowner benefit from this?
Funding for private properties for historic preservation is challenging to come by, not just in this state, but nationwide, because, we're just shelling out money for people who have no skin in the game, basically. The biggest benefit that I find to property owners is that ad valorem tax credit. And it's an incentive for them to get their home or property designated on that local register, and then any improvement that they make that's in kind and within the Secretary of Interior standards, they can receive that tax abatement, and that's going to be the biggest incentive to them for historic preservation. But in terms of private funding, it's very challenging to come by, usually by nonprofits, but unless the property is income producing and on the National Register and qualifies for that federal tax credit, it's going to be very challenging to come by for local residents.
So on the ad valorem tax credit, am I correct that we can only waive or partially waive or credit the city's portion of the property taxes, which is pretty negligible to your whole tax bill? The city's portion is pretty small. So you mentioned federal tax credits or incentives. How does that work?
That's for only National Register listed properties. If we're talking like, normal historic homes around here that are kind of, there's a few peppered around, it's going to be challenging to get those on the National Register. But that's just in terms of like monetary type benefits. Like, there is also the benefit, historic preservation is integral to communities, especially like Temple Terrace, where y'all are feeling this immense development pressure. Homeowners don't want a 3-story home built next to them, right, with their little single-story house. Historic preservation is a way for communities to preserve their identity and to preserve their neighborhoods that they bought into in the first place. You know, you don't buy a house just for the house. You buy it for the neighborhood as well. And historic preservation has that extra benefit to it. This is kind of what we call intangible heritage, and it's kind of difficult to put on a screen because it's difficult to articulate, right? Because there's just that, it's that thing, and you can't quantify it, but it's important still. And that's the other benefit that this has. So it's challenging to express that to property owners because you're not going to get a number value. However, if you don't do it and you have these massive, 3-4 story homes built next to you, in 10 years, it's not going to look like the neighborhood that you bought into anymore. So, yeah.
Would those benefits be available even if you don't have a historic district?
Right.
Excuse me, Steve, your microphone. It's not on.
Sorry.
You have to ask it again. I don't
Yeah.
think anybody
Okay.
understands.
Are those neighborhood benefits, the intangibles, available even if you don't have a historic district?
So that ad valorem tax credit is available to any locally designated property.
Right.
So it does not have to be a district. It does not have to have a boundary. It can be a single property. I've seen some communities, while we require you have a mechanism for historic districts within your ordinance, you do not actually have to put forth any historic district. If homeowners just want to designate their home and, skip a house and then the next house is designated, that's fine. Whatever is totally up to the community is fine, but you don't have to have a district to qualify for the ad valorem. I do find for like neighborhoods who have a very cohesive identity, historic districts might be the way to go. However, I understand that communities are different and the amount of involvement they want from local government is different depending on where you are. So that is up to the property owners.
But to stop the 3-story house next to you, it only works if you have a district.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Council members. Councilmember Abel.
So I was looking through the supplementary minutes in the back, and it said on one of the pages that the cost of the Certified Local Government Program in 2015 was $25,000. Besides the requirements that you listed, is there a cost associated, or is that just something?
No, ma'am. There's
Okay.
no costs. It's a free program. I guess, quote unquote, cost would be staff time for your planning staff to conduct historic preservation duties, but monetary cost, none.
Okay, thank you.
None for this program, yeah.
I saw that in there too, just a comment, and I don't know where that came from because it wasn't in the previous meeting minutes, and then all of a sudden it just showed up in the next, and I don't know where that came from. I went back and forth several times. It's like, I don't know if we missed a meeting in there or, because all of a sudden there was a price tag at the next meeting and the previous meeting said there wasn't.
This is
And
the
I don't know where.
second time this has happened to me, is that a community has just pulled a number out of somewhere, and I have no idea where it came from.
Yeah.
It's a free program. It doesn't cost
Because
anything.
later, that $25,000 in another meeting, that goes to $90,000. I don't know if you caught that one.
Didn't.
Yeah,
And I don't know where those numbers came from.
Well, I'm glad you're here to tell us that that's.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mayor, I think some of those numbers came from projections that extra staff would have
That's
to be
the only-
hired for historic
The only
preservation.
thing I could figure.
I think they were talking about initially one historic preservation planner, and then later on, must have been 3 new planners or something, but
Yeah.
I think those were tied to operational
F-
costs that they
FTE,
projected would occur.
That's the only thing I could think of too. But Councilmember Schuster, Vice Mayor, I'm sorry.
Yes,
Vice
thank
Mayor
you.
Schuster.
This question may seem a little disjointed, but I'm having difficulty figuring out, given the size of the area where our houses, and I don't know, 55 or 70 houses, whatever it be, how does it benefit everybody else? Can we create a CLG and then let individual houses opt in if they reach a certain criteria? Okay, she's shaking yes, and you're shaking no.
No, depends what you mean by opt-in, and I think I'm catching your drift here. In order to be a certified local government, your legislation, your historic preservation legislation, must apply to everywhere that's within Temple Terrace's jurisdiction. You cannot donut hole, and you cannot pick and choose where historic preservation occurs. With that being said, we encourage property owner consent for designation. Now, if a house to be designated, property owner must consent and want this. If their neighbor doesn't want to, great, then the neighbor is not underneath that legislation, right? Their house is then not regulated with
All right,
that ordinance.
let me be a little more specific. Okay, say we had a house on little old Willowwick Avenue. It was built in the 20s. Okay, but then across the street, you have a house that's built in the 50s. We're talking two different, in my mind, we're talking two different things. A mid-century revival was built in the 50s. 22, that's the original Spanish-style architecture, what the original neighborhood was built around. Okay, I think what we would be trying to do would be to protect the 20s house as opposed to the 50s house. Can you pick and choose on that type of scenario?
Yes.
Or does that defeat the purpose of the CGL?
Both. Yes, you can conduct preservation however you want to conduct it. However, our age mark, and the one that the National Register uses as well, is 50 years and older. So while 1950 may not seem that ancient to us, 20 years from now, it might be. And we notice the changing in styles, especially in Florida. You know, we have two big land booms, right? And both are significant. So the goal would to be to preserve those places that matter to our community. Not necessarily trying to freeze things in time from what we find is the oldest, but manage the change that happens to those properties that are significant to us. So what might matter to one community might not matter to another. And so this is why we encourage it done at the local level. If, you know, the community sees no value in that 1950s home, then there's no value in that home. Now, they might not see that value in the 1920s home either, but it just depends on the community and the owners and what happened there. Does that make sense? Because you still look confused.
Ms. Justice, I think what I'm hearing is, can one house be, and I think I know the answer to this, one house can be designated as historic and included in this program, and one house right next door of the same age cannot be.
Correct.
It's property specific.
Correct.
Is that, I think that's
Yeah,
what you're trying to
Yeah.
get at.
Is it
Yeah.
their choice or?
Yes. Yes,
Okay,
it's the
so-
property owner's choice.
Okay, so it's property owner's choice. I just don't see what they get out of it. I'm just, you know, the grants are the grants, but the grants are hard to get. Tax exemptions, maybe. I don't know that there would do them much benefit, but I don't know what we get from it.
Community pride will go a long ways, and I know that sounds kind of cheesy to you, but community pride and community heritage means a lot to property owners, and especially people who have been living in this city for a very long time. That is something that's valuable to them also.
I think too, you can have other types of incentives. You could waive building permit fees. We had talked about the day we were out, we toured 7 of the homes. You can do workshops with property owners, with contractors and different people, and help them learn their safety. The fire department could do an inspection and look and see what kind of wiring and thing needs to be replaced. And, you know, we could do free inspections. So there's things you could do to provide information to the property owners to improve their homes, and then they can make them safer. And there is community pride. I know that, you know, in the month I've been here, people have talked about the homes and the beauty of the neighborhoods and the trees and the different things. So it all does fall into what.
I misunderstand, I'm not necessarily against it. It's just I'm trying to figure out, you know, what.
Direct benefit.
Direct benefits for everybody.
Great.
Okay. Okay, that's all I have. So, yeah, I'm good.
Councilmember Donahue.
Yeah, I hear the scenario of one 1920s and one 1950s, but I will tell you right now, we have whole neighborhoods that are working together to preserve their mid-century modern houses. I mean, they have Facebook page and, you know, they're making sure that they maintain those GE built-in ovens and, you know, some of the, I mean, it's incredible to watch. I myself live in one of those houses that one of our citizens who's sitting here today complained about when he was a kid. They were tearing down his tree fort. So I'm in one of those as well. So to me, we do have whole neighborhoods, and that actually is where the devastation is most likely to occur first, because those are not historic even by anyone just driving by. They may not think that they are, but if you live in one and you know the beauty of terrazzo floors, all those different things. But my point is, those are the neighborhoods, to me, that need to be, please don't get up in arms when you think I'm saying that the Mediterraneans are not, because there's so few of them, they need to be preserved. But it's those whole neighborhoods of, 20, 40, 50 houses that were built from 50 to 55. And yes, every third house is the same floor plan, but that's where a house coming in that completely changes the neighborhood is probably the most dangerous, because then you lose that designation just by driving through. So I think you answered my question. It is the property owners who would say, we want to participate, and I can tell you right now, we have neighborhoods that they will be the first to join up and say, we want our street and the street, whatever.
Right.
Okay, so that's
Yes.
strictly driven by them once we become a CLG.
You can do historic preservation and not be a CLG. You can go ahead and enact an ordinance and then operate underneath that ordinance. In terms of property owner consent, each community does it differently. Now, Tampa, Miami, they can designate properties without owner consent, but that's just due to the nature of those communities. And
I'm sorry, Tampa did what?
Tampa and Miami are just some examples where they can designate historic
I
structures
didn't hear the word, okay, all right.
with no owner consent. However, in terms of historic districts, each community runs a little bit differently. We recommend 50+1 because that's what the NR, the National Register, uses for their process. A 50+1% vote in favor of nomination of the district. You can do it, vote in favor of, or 50+1 nays to the designation.
That's for
We'll
the
stop
district,
it.
not
For the
the
district.
property.
Yes, sir. Some communities I've seen do 80%. But however, they don't have any historic districts because that is so high. And then they see the cohesiveness of their community kind of get like dismantled a little bit. But that's totally up to you. You do not have to be a CLG prior to doing this. However, being a CLG does provide you more tools in order to do that.
So if it doesn't cost us anything,
No, ma'am.
and it provides tools and grant money, my question would be, why not?
This is why we are the 5th largest program in the country.
Well, I'm in favor of pursuing the idea also, but it's not that slam dunk. I see the problems that arose over the past several times. Those problems are real, and I think there may be a way to thread around some of this, but those problems are real. What benefit is there to the homeowner, and how do we appropriately draw the line between historic preservation and homeowners' property rights? And so, I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it. I think there's a lot of merit in it, but
Once
it's,
somebody signed on, they said, I want my house.
well, we're kind of getting ahead of,
Yeah.
but anyway. Well, I think Councilmember Chambers had,
I was just going to ask, around the Bay Area, how many CLGs are there? Do you know?
A lot. Hillsborough County is one. Tampa, St. Pete Beach. Clearwater is not, sadly.
Plant City.
Dade City is not. Pasco County.
Plant City.
Plant City is, yes, sir. Pasco County has approached me recently. They are looking into it. Manatee County is a CLG. I'm trying to think. Gulfport. There's a couple. Anna Maria.
Dunedin.
Dunedin is one as well. Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot around here.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
There's a bunch. I'm sorry,
I-
Vice Mayor.
My question was, at this point, is mechanics. So, segueing off what Councilman Donahue said, we could create a CLG citywide, okay, or CGL, citywide, and then individual neighborhoods then could opt in, or as long as they're 50+1, or whatever mechanics we do it, you could do Herschel, south of Whiteway, or Linda Avenue, or whatever, the individual streets could opt their way into the program. And then with the commission that would be set up, then they would have the opportunity to do to initiate the part. To me, that's what, two things. One, I wasn't considering the 50s houses as historically significant. My daughter lives in one. I grew up in one years ago. But, with that clarification, it makes a lot more sense. I can see what the
That
overall
means that
benefit.
you're historically significant.
Oh, wait, I'm way beyond that. I'm way
That's
beyond that.
odd,
I'm way
okay.
beyond that.
I
So,
have a
but,
third grant for that.
huh? Yeah, right. But anyway, so I can understand that. And mechanics, it's not, slam dunk, everybody's in it, you have no options. It's still an opt-in type scenario where, they make a conscious effort to become part of the overall program. But the city's already in the program, designated as such, and then as it grows and develops, other areas can take advantage of it. Okay,
Well,
thank you.
it's just the city is the CLG. It is a certified local government program. So we're not certifying the board. We're not certifying any local district. We are certifying you.
Right.
And then you just operate underneath that. I mean, it doesn't mean anything other than that you are receiving benefits and training from the state. It's not like little districts are their own CLGs. Like Temple Terrace is the CLG. And with that historic district, I wanted to add that you don't need any more than 2 buildings to create a historic district, or 2 properties. So you can have like a little group of 5 and they can have their own historic district. It does not have to be a massive, like, entire neighborhood. And then you can always, it's not set in stone, you can go back and amend it. If somebody else wants to be a part of the district, then you can include them.
I think probably for us, we should start by talking about individual properties instead of districts, right? Districts may be something, but
You can start small is what
let's
I'm trying to
start, I think our conversation at the beginning needs to be on individual properties. So Councilmember Abel.
My question was about districts too, but it pretty much just got answered. But I was just thinking, we have large areas that have homes that are 50+ years old. And I was wondering if creating a historic district is there some special process for that? Because we said we don't have any official districts, but is there like any procedure for that? Or do we just say, oh yeah, that all the houses there are 50+ years old? And
It's a great question. It's the same as doing like an individual type designation, except depending on how many properties you have, you run through what's the significance, how old is it? What's the significance? What about it matters to our community? Okay, whether it be architectural significance, did someone important live there? Was there some community event that happened for a few years, like some festival or whatever that happened in that area? And then does it have integrity? So how does it convey how it's significant? And you answer all these questions, and the process is outlined within your ordinance. So it's the same for individual and districts. And then your board will review that and say, yes, we like this. Yes, we think this is satisfactory. And then they can either make the final decision themselves, or they can send it on to city council to then adopt. In terms of districts, we recommend having like cohesive, we're not trying to like gerrymander any districts, right? So we want something that's kind of cohesive together. We don't want any donut holes or any kind of wacky business. Basically, how you would want your local government officials to divide their jurisdiction is how you would want that historic district to be divided.
thank you.
Council members.
I have one question.
Councilmember Donovan.
So we have some truly historic buildings that we don't own. And how do we, or can we even begin to go here? How do we preserve them and put some teeth so that they aren't neglected to the point where they, well, sorry, it fell apart, so we had to tear it down? Do we have any way of doing that, protecting those buildings?
Within your ordinance, this is what we call demolition by neglect, and it actually happened to one of my favorite citrus packing houses, which is quite sad. But you can put within your ordinance that you must keep your property up, and not let it just fall apart. that is within regular building code as well, that you can't just let this building be a hazard to people inside. You can use that to enforce it. And also, if that building is designated, then it has special protections underneath that ordinance where you can't just neglect it and pretend like it's not important anymore. The majority of communities have that within their historic preservation ordinance. It's something that I recommend. However, some communities don't have it, and that's totally up to them. But yes, there is a way to put in teeth. As a CLG, we do require enforcement of that ordinance, and that is one way to do that.
So, I mean, this is, even if this person or persons have not chosen to come into the program. That's
It-
my, yeah,
It depends on how we write the ordinance.
yeah, okay.
Right.
There's nothing to
right,
do with CLG, it depends on how we write the ordinance.
Right, because you are the only ones that choose to come into the program, is Temple Terrace, because we are certifying that
Okay,
local
so
government.
we do that first, and then
Right.
we build it within.
Right. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
The first step is writing the ordinance, drafting an ordinance. And that will set out the parameters of what you want to do within the city of Temple Terrace and how you want to engage property owners, and then what kind of standards you want to have. Then that process, and you appoint a historic preservation board. Then you go to the state for the certified. So the first step will be to hammer out an ordinance.
Of which I'm more than happy. My door is always open. With any questions about the process itself, you are not lost. Please come to me. You have my contact info. Any questions about your ordinance, please send me drafts. Please come to me with questions about your board. How do we get started? How do we do this? I don't want you to be lost in the process. That, just because you're not a part of the program yet doesn't mean that, I can't help. So.
Other questions for Ms. Justice? Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So,
Very informative.
council, if I might, for some conversation purposes, throw a proposed course of first steps out here for you to consider. The CLG itself is really not controversial, as you pointed out. There's really no downside to becoming a CLG. The key to this, the sticky part of this, is the ordinance. And we can't become a CLG without an ordinance. And that's where past councils have become mired down in, how do we get an ordinance that strikes a balance between property owners' rights and historic preservation? That's not easy to do. And the draft one in here, I'm sure you guys went through it too. I went through it and through it and through it as if we were gonna vote on it, and I marked it all up, and there's things I like, things I don't like. I would suggest, if this is something that the council thinks has merit, and I do, and something that we should explore, that the first step, even before we start bouncing around draft ordinances, is to hold a series of interactive workshops with the people that own these homes. There's no bigger stakeholder in this than them. And so we may not know all of them, but we know 55 or so of them, right? I think we should, if we want to do this, we have a couple years. Our centennial's 25. We're trying to get something in place, but rather than try to ramrod something through, why don't we take our time and send each of them a letter inviting them to an interactive workshop. We'll have it at Lightfoot. Of course, the public's invited too, but we want to make sure we get those people invited. And in addition to the 2 readings of an ordinance, we have some conversation with them about their concerns and I don't want to be forced into it, or I don't want to be told this, or and let's get some sense of what their feelings are. That would be, to me, the first step. If we get 55 people and nobody's interested in this, then, okay, we have a little bit of a, but
You're gonna have to go bigger than 55 people,
Yeah, it was not.
because right now, you're looking at Mediterranean, 55.
that's what I'm looking at.
You probably got
Well,
400.
You guys are right. I mean, there's more than, yeah. Well, and we're gonna have to have a
Yeah.
series of, you're right. And, the idea of the district, I didn't mean to prematurely dismiss that. I'm just trying to
I know.
start out simple is
Yeah.
what I'm trying to do, but, so to me, that would be kind of the first step, is to have an interactive series of, to get public comment and see if we can, this is not gonna be easy, I can tell you, these meetings are not gonna be easy, and there's no way we're gonna gain consensus of everybody. We're not gonna make everybody happy with, no matter which way we go. If we do nothing, we're not gonna make everybody happy with that either.
We've been there before.
We've been there before. They've been there for 50 years, they've been there. So I'd like to get this done.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, they've been batting us around for 50 years, and every time it fails because it's the details of the ordinance are where we run into problems. Well, I could go for this except the tax credit. Well, I can't do that. Well, okay, so the whole thing fizzles. And well, I could go for this except I don't want to be told what kind of windows to put in. Well, okay, and now the whole thing fizzles again. And so this has been going on for 50 years. I'd really be kind of nice if we were the council that could get something done here.
Nice.
And maybe we start out smaller than we wish we could, you know, and, you know, as we all know, ordinances are not
Yes.
written in stone. We amend them all the time as things happen and other properties become eligible. Maybe we form districts and we, you know, every year there's more homes that are 50 years old.
Now, this draft that's in here, where's, what year is this?
What year is it? I don't know.
Is this ours, or?
It's ours. It's based on the city of Gulfport with some of Dunedin. And it's one of the ones that
Both are certified local.
Okay, so we
Yeah.
have one that has been approved
That is a draft from your staff.
from,
Taken from bits from two others. Now,
okay.
I have gone over it, and there are some minor things that need to be altered in order to comply with our regulations of the state. But it's nothing like, no change in process or anything. It's just wording things.
Okay,
So they meet guidelines.
so we should take this giant notebook and read this piece.
Well,
Really, this is the possible ordinance.
yeah, well,
At least it's not starting from ground zero here. They've
correct,
done a
but I
lot of
think we
work
need to
already.
talk to our community.
Oh, my goodness. But the one thing you don't want to do is say to somebody, hey, what do you think? And then they start asking questions, and we're like, we don't know, we just want to know what you think, you know, so.
Well, I did make note, I mean, I have a whole list of questions, and this is not the
Yeah.
time to go into
Yeah,
all that. But
absolutely.
I'd like to know what Tampa and Plant City have in place too.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the other, you know, I've only looked at this one, so, and you were trying to talk, Vice Mayor.
Ms. Pam, she looks like she wants to say something.
Yes, ma'am.
I was going through this book too and saw that at some point it was acknowledged that our comprehensive plan had stated that in our future land use element objective 4.2 called for an adoption of an ordinance by 1992. So we're not like pushing this, we're not ramming
what's
this
your
through
point?
quickly. Well, it's when you said ramming this through quickly, it started, I wanted to laugh because, you know, we were supposed to have had this done by 1992. So, and as I listened to all this, I'm just seeing, you know, the sticking points were, some of them were misinformation. You know, I saw that $25,000 and I thought there's no way this is going to cost us $25,000 just to do. And then I saw that, you know, first one of the things was, oh, it's too close to budget time, then we're not close enough to budget time, and every time this came up, it was never the right time, and it never made any sense, really.
There's no perfect day.
And then apparently our city manager stated that it was going to cost $90,000 to pay one planner to administer this.
Back in,
I was the legal advisor to St. Pete's Historic Preservation Commission. The Board of Adjustment took on the chore of being the commission. So when that was part of what they did, and here, our Board of Adjustment may not hear a variance for months and months. So it might give them something more to do to be the Historic Preservation Commission. Even then in St. Pete, and they had historic districts, I helped them rewrite their historic overlay. I helped them when they totally revamped their historic preservation ordinance. I went to meeting after meeting, and they eventually had 3 people in the planning department who did historic preservation. But you don't have to have a district. You can do this voluntarily. If someone, like I did in St. Pete, I spent tons of money and love and effort to save my nearly 100-year-old house. And once somebody does that to a house, you don't want to see somebody come in later and rip out your handmade wood windows and stick vinyl ones in. So I was willing to landmark my house, and maybe that'll stop somebody some year from buying it, but I don't care. That's clearly not the house for them, and I care more about preserving that house. So, and it isn't always about the architecture, as you heard. Sometimes it's just who lived there. So you can change things on the house. It also doesn't prevent them from doing anything on the inside. It's always just the outside. Sometimes it's just preserving the facade. Someone may come along and say, I want to tear down this building and build something else. And you can say, fine, you can build something else, but you must preserve the facade or an element of it. When I wanted to add a second story onto a detached garage of my house, that was fine. The city didn't say no, but the interesting thing is if you look very closely, the stucco is a little bit different from the first floor to the second floor. That's how it shows this was an addition to a historic building. And those are the kinds of things that are maybe required. You're still allowed to do your changes and do things. People shouldn't be so upset or worried about that because there's ways to work around it to preserve the old and still allow some new. This is not going to take, in this size city, a full-time person to administer. We don't know if, and it should be voluntary. It should start off voluntary. Somebody like me wanting to preserve their house. Somebody like the mid-century modern neighborhood wanting to preserve those houses in the neighborhood. And I don't think we're going to have a huge rush of people initially. So this could be hired out on a one house basis. We'll get one application, and there are people available that you can hire to review the application for that one house. If it turns out we have hundreds of houses, then great, our program's working, and maybe we should hire another person, and that would have to be put into the budget. But we've got plenty of ordinances throughout the state of Florida that it is not going to be hard to come up with an ordinance. And it should not be that difficult to become a certified government either. We can draft that too. According to these minutes, the city manager stated he already had one. I don't know if it's in here or not. I didn't see that particular ordinance, but he stated he already had one. And council had voted unanimously more than once telling staff to go do that. So, I mean, over and over again, council said, go do that. And
Yeah.
every time there was something, that was thrown in, and usually it was money, but I really don't see that the money should be the problem getting this going.
Okay.
So.
Council, we only have a few minutes, so what are we going to do? Councilmember Chambers.
Oh, I was going to say, I appreciate Pam taking on this project.
Vice Mayor?
I'm volunteering my deputy city attorney to help take on this project.
Nothing's gonna happen unless we do something, so we might as well, let's
do
go
it,
forward
yeah.
with it, see what we come up with.
Well, when you say move forward with it, in what way? You want to schedule meetings like we're talked
I
about?
think,
or-
we definitely need to have the town hall type meeting where we have the public can come in and they can express their views on it. Move forward with a draft ordinance to see if we can come up with something. Just a general communications, standard communications protocol that we use with our public to make sure that they understand what we're doing, where it goes with this, and what we get, what ultimately happens with this type of a designation, an ordinance. Let's move forward, see how far we get with it. Maybe we're the council and get it done.
Councilmember Chambers.
And I agree with that, but I also think, Councilmember Donahue said it, we have to have some idea, so when the people show up to these meetings, we have ideas what they're gonna be talking about, you know.
I think that's wise too, or we'll just have no control
And
over it.
that, go ahead.
Councilmember Abel.
I agree. However, I think that based on what the city attorney said, we don't really need all the stakeholders to, we need to have a stakeholder meeting. We need to bring everybody in and have that conversation. However, it's voluntary, right? That's my understanding?
You get, I mean, there are places where, as you heard, it's not voluntary. They're probably trying to preserve a whole mid-century modern or Art Deco
Your mic?
neighbor- or Art Deco neighborhood someplace like in Miami. But in St. Pete, the lady who
Let's
owned.
assume for interest of time that it's voluntary. 'Cause
Yes, it can be voluntary. So you're not forcing something on anyone other than the person who has said, I want to designate my house. And then obviously, anybody purchasing that house later, they've got a landmark designated home.
So I think that we should move forward with drafting an ordinance and make sure the understanding that it's voluntary is clearly stated. So when we have this meeting, we can make it clear to the community that, this is a great idea, here's why, but you don't have to. I mean, just like she said. So I think we should move forward with the ordinance.
And staff can provide you with a fact sheet, pros and cons, and what benefits are to the property, so we can provide you information at that from our level.
That would be very helpful. I just don't want to put the cart before the horse here. I want to make sure that we don't get pilloried here because we don't really know what this ordinance could say. I mean, we can always say it's a draft, and this is where we're going. What do you want it to look like? And then we have something to actually get feedback on, So I think what you're hearing is that we're all in favor of moving forward. I think we should look to Dr. Spina to see,
Okay.
when can we come back with this?
So here's what I think I'm hearing. Let me make sure that everybody's agreeable to this before we go off and clear the wrong forest here. So we could, in the near future, host a town hall meeting at Lightfoot, advertised as an interactive type meeting where everybody's going to get an opportunity to give us their views on this. We could, at that meeting, host and invite the people that we know, and certainly there will be more, you're right, but the ones that we know, the 1920s homes that we know, we would purposely invite those people, right? With me so far? Everybody's good so far? Okay. At that meeting, we would come up with a presentation of sorts to give some bullets of what the CLG would entail and what some of the highlights of a possible ordinance might look like, so that we don't just have a free-for-all, right? And we would highlight, you would opt in, right? This would be voluntary if that's what we are agreeing to. We're here to discuss what the criteria might be, what the possible benefits to you might be, what you'd like to see, those kinds of things to kind of guide the discussion.
That works.
Does that sound like a plan to you?
To start, yes.
A start? Dr. Spina, does that sound okay?
Yes, sir.
Does that sound reasonable to the city attorney? Yeah. Does that sound like we're on the right track? How about our historical expert? Does that sound like we're going the right way? Okay. Obviously, that will be an interesting meeting, but it'll be a start, and let's see if we can get this done this time. Okay? Anything else? We're good?
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much for coming,
Thank you.
and we are adjourned for